If there's one thing Germans know, if there's one thing that Germans can teach other people, is that democracy and the rule of law can never be taken for granted. It's breakable.
It is very difficult to travel through Germany and take a historical tour of this place and not see consistent echoes of what's happening in the United States.
This part of Berlin has been described as a memorial landscape.
The kinds of radical political innovation, the kinds of instability.
Sophie was caught by the warden of Munich University distributing leaflets, and he seized her and handed her over to the Gestapo.
A lot of that we saw here is really reminiscent of what's going on in the United States while we're here.
Good morning. My name is George Chung. I direct More Equitable Democracy. Welcome to Germany.
We are here today in Berlin, Germany. We came to this country to watch their elections because we think that there's a lot to learn about how Germany conducts their elections that we could take back with us in the United States.
I chose to come on this trip because I think understanding the world around us, understanding the communities that exist and how those communities both came to be and where they're going can help all of us really develop our next steps, understand history, and ensure that it doesn't repeat itself.
The trip is a great mix of election policy.
It is not an MMP problem. It is not a mixed member system problem.
Contemporary politics, but also history, and all three of those fit together because the election structure is grounded in Germany's history.
A lot of what we learned about what led up to the atrocities of the Holocaust started off with law. It started off with a democratic process.
So the reason why we are stopping here and going to see this memorial, of course, has to do with what happened here in 1933. They didn't call it book burning, of course, no? We call it book burning. They call it action against the un-German spirit. It makes completely clear that there was one group that was going to define what was German and what was not.
We have an opportunity really to learn from German history and think, how do we want to address some of the challenges we're seeing in the US today?
Biggest items that has stood out for me is just how active of a democracy it is here. It's almost like we're spectators and we're watching a show in the United States, whereas here it feels like people are immersed in it. It is a daily activity to reflect on democracy and hopefully strengthen it.
They were not all Nazis, but they were a nation of passive spectators, basically. And today in Germany, they have developed this concept they call civil courage. This is, kids in school are taught, never be a spectator, never be a bystander.
I think the remembrance culture here is very contradictory to the US. The amount of accountability really shows, and that is something to pay attention to.
I'm a law professor at GW, and often I'll teach these systems. And so I'll read and get up to speed, but there's nothing like being immersed in a culture and in a system and absorbing it for a week or so. There are so many insights that I got out of this trip that are deeper than simply teaching it in a class.
You couldn't have gotten this from a book. Being able to talk to people who are politicians, advocates in the field, hearing from someone who was a part of forming the party that eventually helped overthrow a dictatorship, I mean, that's not something you're going to get out of a book.
Like, this trip is a learning tour, but it's also kind of an incubator for having these conversations about where to go next.
This trip was a chance to see a well-established multi-party democracy, understand why they created the system they have, what's the problem still with it, because no system does away with all problems. But the Germans have built this thing on the ashes of the world's worst system ever, and they were pretty careful about what they did.
Germany is really interesting because they essentially established a different system of proportional representation. It's called mixed member proportional. You get 2 votes.
1, who's your favorite candidate? 2, who's your favorite party? It's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward.
I like the system. You know, we get 2 different votes. It's the Erststimme for a candidate, it's the Zweitstimme for a party. And I like the Zweitstimme more.
That's what I like about the German election system, that you have that broad variety of parties.
I never had doubts about proportional representation. I'm a believer. I wanted to see it in practice. The German system helps keep all of these parties in proportion rather than giving undue influence to a faction like the far right, which is growing, but overall is still a small portion of society.
You know, Germany had 83% turnout in this election, which is crazy to think about, just the level of participation they have here relative to us.
What the Germans suggest to me is if you have better rules, you will get better outcomes.
After the Nazis had won the elections, the process of ending the democracy went quickly.
7 years is what we heard, and I couldn't think to myself, well, does that mean we have roughly 6 years to make sure we can save American democracy?
Big thanks to More Equitable Democracy, and I look forward to continuing to build this network of people who really believe that we can do better.
I am teaching on Monday morning, jet lagged as hell, and talk about proportional representation versus winner take all in the United States. I'm going to lay out the situation, but I'm also going to let them know that I have some pretty strong opinions about which system functions better because I've seen it in action.